Okay, let's do boiler mechanics, economics, bankings, macroeconomics. So, I guess the banks had some more issues today. Now, this was an interesting article. This is out of the Telegraph. This is this lady, and she quoted a Stanford professor Amit Saru. He's probably very political, and he's a total hack, being that he's a professor at Stanford or academic from Stanford. They're literally about the most corrupt of all of academia, and that's saying a lot. But apparently, he's got the gumption to say that thousands of banks are underwater. Let's not pretend this is about these banks. He said a lot of the U.S. banking system is potentially insolvent. Now, I'm trying to dig up, I'm trying to connect the dots here on why he would say this. Obviously, maybe this is him trying to put that out there to uh, express his opinion that rates need to be cut or whatever they want to do. Um, the thing about it is now, Jeff Snyder just did actually an interview on Real Vision, and Jeff Snyder and Steve Van Meter have been on it since way before all this stuff started. So shout out to those two. Those two are an invaluable resource. And I watch a lot of stuff. George Gammon, he's been on it. Especially, he was keeping track. He was talking about Credit Suisse last year. So you have a lot of people on the internet that have been on YouTube, and that's the main platform they're on, that have really been on it. When all this stuff started, I was thinking, SVB by itself could not cause a systemic issue, obviously, for obvious reasons. But where there's smoke, there's always fire. Where there's public officials saying don't worry about this, or there's no subprime crisis, or the crisis is contained, then you should probably assume the opposite if you want to bet, if you're a betting person. So then we had First Republic a couple days ago. Now today there's a lot of jittery stuff going on in the jittery. There's a lot of banks, their stocks are crashing. This Psychologically, I think the dam has broken at this point. So I just, when they started saying this is contained, and all this a month ago, that's when my ears perked up, and I'm like, really? Should we really assume this is all over? Okay. Now, Steve Van Meter talks about it a lot. A big part of what's happening is the money is basically being drained from the system. Um, Money is like the oil that greases up the economic engine. And when you take too much oil out, the engine starts having problems, starts stuttering. First, it starts, rocking a little bit, getting shaky, and then it starts trying to stall, might overheat, all sorts of stuff could happen. So that's what we're seeing. And Jeff Snyder just made the excellent point that it seems like something systemically is preventing money from being used in ways that's productive, and instead the money just gets sucked into, in my opinion, scams, a lot of grifting shit going on, and we're not really doing anything productive with our economy. And so now you got the money just really going to bullshit, like FTX bullshit. Uh, I think that part of that could have to do with just how badly regulated the system is, how over-regulated and how badly over-regulated and over-badly regulated it is. What we're seeing going on now, Steve Van Meter was talking about it in this video here. So just got to give Steve Van Meter a shout out because, I don't want to plagiarize anybody. I'm just here giving my boiler mechanic 2 cents, informing people, that may not be into it but have a little bit of interest. Here, this way I'm showing people where to go, who to look up on YouTube. He's getting more into the mindset. He's talking a lot about the global economy having an issue. I just wonder what he means by global economy. Now, everybody, I heard about it Monday on Blockworks Macro, Weston's show on Blockworks Macro on Monday, that they had this surprise PMI index that was pretty low. So whoever puts the PMI index together, China wasn't able to convince them to lie about it. But then again, all of this talk about China lying about their economic growth, and all of their numbers, and just all of these dispersions against China. I'm sick of it. China is a interesting country. I'm very interested in China, and I'm very open-minded about China. And I'm a big fan of Chinese history. I talk about that sometimes. It's one of my favorite little subsets of history, because China was a country that for thousands of years kind of developed, kind of isolated from the rest, all of the drama of Europe. I mean, they had some drama in that region of the world, but mostly China was a huge civilization that had no major competitors, right? Although, if you want to call it a single civilization. But, they didn't. So studying Chinese history really gives you a very good groundwork on how human societies develop. And so that's a side note. That's has nothing to do with what I wanted to talk about. So I'll stop there. But if the recent history is important, and I would recommend people learn about at least the last 100 years before they believe all the BS that they're told everywhere in American media, even on most of the alternative media. I would argue that China is, at least at the low to mid levels, at the level of small to mid-sized businesses, and at a local level, regional, provincial level, and below, there's more economic freedom in China than the United States, and I will stand by that. This is just what I'm seeing. I'm sure there's a lot of corruption involved too, especially locally. That's been a problem that's been talked about for years. China is not some totalitarian, completely planned economy. It's not nearly to the level of planning that the Soviet Union was. The national government of China is very small compared to the United States, and compared to it's only 15% of total government spending goes to the national government. The rest goes to the provincial governments. I heard that number recently. I forget where, but I'm pretty sure that's what I remember hearing. And the provincial governments have massive autonomy, maybe as much, if not more, autonomy than U.S. states. That's widely known. That's been a point of contention throughout recent history in Chinese politics. Hu Jintao was of the camp of more decentralized governance. And he's still a prominent figure. He's kind of old now. He was the one, I believe, that they walked out the other day in the their meeting. They had their communist meeting. China, and Colonel Doug McGregor said this on one of these Ukraine shows. He said, China is communist in name only. And I agree with that. And so this idea that China just is this devious, communist, evil dictatorship, listen. Let's just be realistic and stop living in a fantasy. Americans need to get out of their fucking fantasy world that they live in, where everything relates to World War II, Okay, it's got to stop. Okay, things change. Americans are stuck. They're stuck in the 90s. And that goes for Americans of all ages. Even Americans who didn't live in the 90s, who were born after the 90s, are still stuck in the 90s. They're listening to 90s music. They're acting like this is the 90s. It's not. The world has changed. And America's about to get left behind. And this is what I wanted to get to. So Steve Van Meter talks about global, a global recession. But I beg to differ. I don't think it's going to be a global recession. Unless you mean by global, you mean the American-centric definition of the word, which is America and its friends. But that's a group of nations that is shrinking in size. So I wanted to look at I just saw this, and I just on a hunch I looked this up. I said, I bet you when we look at GDP, what are we gonna see? Let's go to the bottom first. Let's just go to the bottom. And what are we gonna see mostly at the bottom? Starting at did I go too far down? Did I sort this? Okay, 2022 annual. Let's just look at the quarterly GDP, just to keep it simple. I already sorted it. Okay, let's go to like 2% and below. Mexico, okay, they're at the top. United States. So this is like, this is how far down the list we are. Starting at the top GDPs, these are going to be outliers. Macau is doing great right now. That is basically the Las Vegas of China. It's kind of semi-independent. It used to be a Portuguese colony, thus I guess that doesn't look like a Portuguese slant. It used to be a Portuguese colony. So Macau, doing good. So, but let's look at the lower end. What do we have here? Switzerland, terrible. Portugal, terrible. Netherlands, terrible. New Zealand, Luxembourg, San Marino, tiny country, one of these microstates. Spain, shitty. Canada, shitty. South Korea, shitty. United States, shitty. Slovenia, shitty. Australia, shitty. Croatia. And let's go further down this list. Denmark, 0%. When's the last time you heard of Denmark having 0% GDP growth? Germany, my homeland. My homeland that I'm very embarrassed at how they've allowed themselves to be the little bitches of the United States. Negative. Germany, -1. -1/10. United Kingdom, shit, negative. Sweden, negative. So what do we see? We see most of the major European countries. Over here, these are all countries that have taken the hardline stance against Russia and have even taken a more hardline stance than they ever have towards China, because this whole Ukraine thing has driven them off the deep end, and they're self-destructing. Their leadership is just throwing out what is the saying? The bed in the bathwater? I don't know. They're just setting the house on fire over there. And then if we go up here, what do we see a lot of? You're going to see a lot of Libya, which is interesting. I wonder if the CIA still runs Libya. You see a lot of African countries. Democratic Republic of the Congo, big friend of China. Rwanda, a lot of China. Ethiopia, China's there. China's probably there, I don't know for sure. India, at the top of the list. Vietnam, at the top of the list. What are we seeing here? We're seeing Global South in East Asia. Uganda. And first of all, I have to go check out Rwanda. Rwanda looks like a beautiful place to visit. Let's just say that. Uganda is looking nice too. South Sudan, they're doing decent. Good for them. China, they're up there at 5.2%. They look like their GDP did pretty good. Oh, they must have lied about that, right? Okay. If that makes you feel better. I'm seeing a lot of Global South. I'm seeing Tajikistan, a Central Asian country. So what's really happening here is there will be a recession for the United States and Western Europe and this whole coalition of the douchebags or willing or whatever you want to call them. The recession's going to be on us. China, what they're doing, the reason South Korea is doing so terrible is because China is redirecting their trade, most likely. China is redirecting their trade. And this may be the beginning of, like, you know, an economic sort of blackmail war situation, like an economic war, which would be like basically blackmail. Like China's probably saying, hey, South Korea, if you want us to trade with you, maybe you should stop, you know, hosting U.S. troops and having U.S. naval bases and all that. China's playing the long game. They're playing Star Trek three-dimensional chess. The United States isn't even playing checkers here. Europe and the United States aren't even playing checkers. So everybody's all, you know, disappointed with China and saying, you know, China, they're not gonna, you know, bail us out of the global recession. No, they're doing more than that. They are redirecting their trade in a way that is not going to come back on a dime. China is not going to be part of this global recession. Russia is not going to be part of this global recession. You know, maybe Japan will be able to avoid it if they're smart. They're looking like they're trying to smarten up. No, the global recession is happening here, the epicenter in the United States, and it's going to spread to all of our protectorates. That's where the global recession is going to be. We have a fake economy. We don't produce anything. The United States produces nothing of value. Germany was doing pretty good until they said we're going to fall on our own sword for the United States and deny ourselves the cheap energy we need to get our economy at max capacity. Now it's amazing what Germany did. It's really amazing. Let me see. Was there anything else I wanted to talk about? Yeah, I wrote this earlier on Twitter. With all these bank problems, I mean, the ironic thing and thus the most likely thing to happen would be, you know, you have sporadic regional bank failures over time. Media isn't talking about it much. They won't talk about it much. And that's going to, like, drain all the FDIC's cash on hand. Now, I have no idea how this works. I'm just saying. You know, I'm sure they can ask the government, ask the Fed to give them more money. But they have a certain amount of cash on hand. They end up using all that over the next 6 months. And then those are going to be mostly uninsured deposits that get covered carte blanche by the regulators. And then the big one happens. And it's like Citi or whatever, like a consumer, like a consumer bank like Wells Fargo or JP Morgan. Do not trust JP Morgan when you got someone like Jamie Dimon or Dimon, whatever his name is. He's a spook. He's been involved in all of this. These spooky financial scams that are done by, you know, governments and intelligence agencies. I don't trust him, you know, and that's who I go to, you know, bank with. But one of these big banks gets fucked basically, and the FDI says, oh well, we used all our money on the other banks, you know, and then they'll have to go pedal to the metal with printing money. Pedal to the metal, but I don't think it'll work. You know, and Jeff Snyder was just saying that on Real Vision. So I'm all over the place here, but basically just brainstorming on video here. Yeah, so this is quite interesting. By the way, can we get a shout out for let's get a shout out to Assad, Bashar al-Assad. Now, let me tell you about this guy. Oh, you know, for anybody that still believes that Ukraine used chemical weapons on their own people when they were winning the war. Bashar al-Assad ordered chemical weapons, or anybody in his military used chemical weapons when they were winning the fucking war. If anybody still believes that, you're a douchebag. I hate you. This guy, he stood up to a concerted regime change effort led by the United States, a regime change effort of massive proportions, complete with several false flag operations. I mean, the amount of money that went into this regime change operation must have been hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe up to $1 trillion if you include the UK and Saudi Arabia. And he withstood this regime change operation and led his country through a dark time and maintained its sovereignty. And this guy, he didn't want to be leader of Syria. His dad died. He was in London being an eye doctor. He did not want to do it, but no one else wanted to take the job. So he did it. He did it reluctantly. You know, they say people that don't want power are the people you want in positions of power, and vice versa. You know, people that want power should not have power, right? I think he's a good example of that. This man is a hero. Okay, he weathered one of the most. He weathered one of the worst storms of the 2010s. He was under more pressure than any other world leader. He made it through. He's not. I believe he's Christian, but you know, Syria looks like a fantastic country. I want to go there soon. But anyway, I am going to leave it at that. I am out.